They called it a dream catcher, but what I found was a doorway to a lucid nightmare I can't escape. It all started at a craft fair in Chester. My mom insisted I take my little brother Eddie while she worked. I wasn't thrilled. 16-year-olds don't typically jump at the chance to spend their Saturday babysitting a hyper 7-year-old in a crowded library craft workshop. But there I was, stuck in a corner, watching Eddie get tangled in colorful beads and wool while kids around him fought over glue sticks and feathers. I was scrolling through my phone trying to block out the chaos when I heard a voice that made me look up. "Gather round, children, and let me tell you the tale of Iktomi, the weaver of dreams." The voice belonged to a man who looked like he'd walked straight out of a Tim Burton movie. He was wearing a deep purple frock coat covered in embroidered vines, a matching waistcoat, and a tall top hat with a black ribbon around it. His walking stick swirled with red and black patterns, catching the light as he moved. He introduced himself as Dr. Lucid, and he had this way of speaking, calm, formal, and magnetic. The kids didn't pay much attention, but I couldn't stop watching him. He told the story of Iktomi, the spider spirit who wove the first dreamcatcher to protect people from nightmares. His voice was hypnotic, drawing me in with every word, and for a moment, the noise of the craft fair seemed to fade. It was just him, the story, and me. And then he turned, locking eyes with me. "You there?" he said, pointing his walking stick at me. "Yes, you. Come here." Every head in the room turned toward me. I froze, unsure if I wanted to walk over or just disappear into the floor. But there was something about his eyes, sharp, almost knowing, that made me stand and approach him. "Ah, splendid," he said as I reached him. "You seem like someone who understands the power of dreams." "Not really," I muttered, feeling awkward under his gaze. "Oh, but you do," he said, leaning closer. "I can see it in your eyes." He reached into his coat and pulled out a dream catcher. At first it looked ordinary, a wooden hoop with a purple threaded web in the center. But instead of feathers hanging from the threads, there were tiny dolls, 7 of them, each no bigger than my thumb. They weren't identical either. Each doll had unique details, different hair colors, outfits, even tiny glasses on one of them. "This," Dr. Lucid said, "is no ordinary dream catcher. It doesn't just filter dreams, it brings them to life." I stared at the dream catcher, both fascinated and uneasy. "How much is it?" He laughed, a deep, rich sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Oh, my dear, it's not for sale. It's a gift. For you." "A gift? Why?" "Because you need it," he said simply, pressing it into my hands. "Hang it above your bed tonight, and prepare to be amazed." I didn't know what else to do, so I took it. Eddie finished his craft, we went home, and I spent the rest of the day trying to forget the strange encounter. But that night, as I got ready for bed, I couldn't resist hanging the dream catcher above my headboard. It swayed gently in the air, the doll's stitched eyes seeming to watch me. "It's just a decoration," I told myself as I turned off the lights. But as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I woke up in darkness. Except it wasn't my room. I was still in my bed, still in my pajamas, but everything else was gone. My walls, my ceiling, even my posters, all replaced by a swirling void of black and purple mist. The mist moved like it was alive, curling and twisting around me. "Ah, I see you're awake." I turned toward the voice and saw him. Dr. Lucid stood in the mist, like it was solid ground. His coat shimmered in the strange light, and his top hat cast an impossibly long shadow. "Welcome," he said, spreading his arms wide. "To paradise." "What? What is this?" I stammered. "Am I dreaming?" "In a way," he said, smiling. "But this is no ordinary dream. This is my creation, a world beyond imagination." Before I could respond, he reached into his coat and pulled out the dolls from the dream catcher. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed them into the air. As they fell, they began to grow, their tiny bodies stretching and twisting until they were life-sized. 7 figures stood before me, human-shaped but not quite human. Their stitched eyes didn't blink, and their movements were too smooth, too perfect. "These are my friends," Dr. Lucid said. "They've been waiting for someone like you." The dolls began to move, their limbs bending and twisting in a synchronized dance. For a moment I forgot to be afraid. They were mesmerizing. "Would you like to stay here, Ruby?" Dr. Lucid asked. His voice was soft, inviting, but there was something beneath it, something dark. I don't know," I whispered. "No need to decide now," he said with a grin. "Just return each night and you'll see." And then I woke up. Every night after that, I returned to paradise. Dr. Lucid was always there, waiting with his eerie grin and his troupe of dancing dolls. At first, it was magical, a world where nothing could hurt me, where my wildest dreams came true. But slowly, things began to change. The dolls started to feel less like companions and more like prisoners. Their movements became stiffer, their smiles more strained. And Dr. Lucid, his kindness began to feel like a trap. One night, he asked me a question. "Do you wish to stay here forever?" Forever. The word sent a chill down my spine, but I found myself nodding. The real world felt dull, meaningless compared to paradise. "Then you must prove your devotion," he said, his grin stretching wider than should have been possible. "Sleep for 24 hours straight. If you can, paradise will be yours." It sounded impossible, but I was desperate to stay. In the real world, I became obsessed. I tried everything to sleep longer, exercising until I collapsed, skipping meals to exhaust myself, even sneaking sleeping pills from my parents. My grades dropped, I stopped talking to my friends, and I barely spoke to Eddie anymore. All I cared about was returning to paradise. But it was never enough. No matter how long I slept, it wasn't 24 hours. Then, one night, I remembered something my doctor had told me when I was first diagnosed with diabetes. Never take more than your prescribed dose of metformin. Too much could put you in a coma. A coma. The word echoed in my mind. That was it. That was how I'd stay in paradise forever. I waited until everyone was asleep, then poured the entire bottle of pills into my hand. I didn't stop to think about what I was doing. I swallowed them all, along with a few sleeping pills for good measure. As dizziness overtook me, I stumbled into bed, staring up at the dream catcher one last time. When I opened my eyes, I was back in paradise. But something was different. Dr. Lucid's smile was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. "You did it," he said. "You're here, forever." For a moment, I felt relief, but then I looked at the dolls. They weren't dancing. They were standing perfectly still, their stitched eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Fear. "They were like you," Dr. Lucid said, following my gaze. "Each of them wished to stay, and now they do. Forever." I tried to back away, but my feet wouldn't move. Dr. Lucid raised his walking stick and slammed it into the ground. My body froze, my limbs locking into place. I couldn't speak, couldn't scream. "Welcome to your lucid nightmare," he said, his grin returning as the dolls closed in around me. And that was when I realized paradise wasn't a dream. It was a trap. Follow if you want more histories like this.